Hello. So in this series of videos, we are going to make a game called BeanRun, and that is using the Kaboom library. So the idea behind using this Kaboom library is that this set of JavaScript code is really good at building video games. So if we use the functions that it has and create objects and characters and everything the way that Kaboom is set up, then it's going to very easily put them on the page and get them to move around the screen and collide with each other and handle scene changes and everything. So we're going to build this first game here to kind of see how Kaboom works. So the idea behind the game that we're making is we're going to have this little bean character. That's that default sprite that gets loaded in. And we're going to have him running along the screen. And he's going to have lots of different platforms that he can hop on top of and run through. And then there's also going to be some enemies that are running at him on the other side. So he's going to want to avoid getting hit by those enemies, but also eating the coins or the food along the way to earn points before he ends up at the end of the finish line. So the code that I have right now is just to kind of play around with a few things. I'm going to zoom out just a bit. My text there. All right, so the code that I have right now just loads in the character. So that was with this add method here. Then I also loaded in some platforms and then did handling some collision between the different platforms and everything. So I'm actually going to remove some of this code just to then hard code it a little bit more as I go into it. All right, so I am definitely going to keep player. So let player equals add. Now add is that function there. So functions always have parentheses. So inside those parentheses, then we give it a list of these components. Whenever you have a list or like a group of things, it's actually called an array, then it's inside of these square brackets here. But I'm just giving it a bunch of things. It's a list of them, and they're all separated by those commas. So for the player, I wanted it to have a sprite, so it's an image. It needed to have a position, needed it to have an area so it can understand collision with things, and I needed it to have a body so it can do physics and it can respond to gravity. So that's what player was all about. So platform, kind of the similar idea. I use the add function, give it a list of components, all separated by commas there. So it has a rectangle, a position, an area. It does respond to collisions. And it's solid, so things can't just pass through it. But it doesn't have a body. It's not going to fall based on gravity. It doesn't really have physics. And then I gave it the tag of platform here. So kind of like how I did for platform 2. So what I'm actually going to do is just remove that variable that I was calling it. So I'm just going to straight up call the function add with the same thing right there. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my platform 2. I'm just going to call the function add. Still providing it with the platform tag, and that's just a name that I'm giving to these things because it's a string, it's name, it's text. I put it inside of those quotes there. That's what I'm actually going to use to identify them into the future. So Kaboom lets me look things up by their tag. So I don't actually always need to have an actual variable name, like how I said let player equal. I might just make them, and then they're just going to have all these tags here. Because eventually I'm going to have a ton of platforms all over the place. So this is more along the line of what we're doing here. So I'm probably going to get rid of this for now. Yeah, player dot collides with the platform. That was just to make something happen in my first version here. So I just deleted that. So notice how after the add function is done, then I am going to keep my key down space. My player is still definitely going to jump still. And I'll just completely remove that right there. Yeah, so now when the key down happens, listening for that space bar, it runs that function. And then what happens inside of that function? Well, player.jump. All right, so let's try to add in an enemy then. So I'm just going to do this right here. I'm going to kind of keep my code organized where it's spawning everything at the top. All my key handlers are going to be more down the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and add another thing in here. So I'm going to use the add function. I'm going to add a list of components. I'm going to give it that list of the things that are in it. And I'm just going to press enter to make it look nicer. So this component is, it's going to be an enemy. So let me just go ahead and give it the tag of enemy. Now I'm eventually going to have a whole bunch of enemies. So I'm just going to use tags instead of making it a variable. So one component is the enemy tag. That's a name. So I had to surround it with quotes. It's going to be we know how to do rect right now, so let's just kind of stick with that. It's going to be a rectangle body of like 50-50. 50 is its width, and then 50 is its height. What other components does it need? Maybe I'll go ahead and just specify this position here. Let's see. So the position is going to be, kind of want to put it on top of this platform that's over here. So if I kind of give it the same position, then that can show me what that's going to look like. So just give it that 250, 500 position. Okay, so let's also give it it's definitely going to respond to collisions. So give it an area. I think we'd like to give it a body as well. Let's just kind of see how that happens. All right, so spawn that in. Okay, so we definitely got it to drop in. One thing I'm going to do here is just for the sake of my screen, I'm going to move these platforms up a little bit. All right, so I'm going to look at this first platform here. I'm setting the position down to 600 is the Y. Let's make that more like 400. So set this position more like 300. That first platform, and then the second platform here, more like 300. So it's still up a little bit. And then the enemy, I'm going to spawn it at that 300, just so I can kind of see what that looks like. Okay. All right, I want to spawn the enemy a little bit higher. I kind of want to see it fall onto the platform. That'll give it a nice look. Maybe like 250, 200. Then give it an X position that's greater, 300. Yeah, okay, so now it kind of falls down into place. Another component I can give this enemy is I can give it a color component. So I'm going to add another thing and add the color. And here I can modify the tint of these characters, and I can do it on a sprite as well. So what I give here are 3 different numbers representing how much of a red tint I want it to have, how much of a green tint, how much of a blue tint. That's just the way colors are organized in computers, is in their red, green, and blue components. So if I want to make it red, then I'm going to give it a whole bunch of red as that first number there, comma, 0 and 0. So give it no green and no blue as that red tint there. Yep, okay. So now I got my little red enemy. All right, now my player jumps and we got our enemy in. So then we'll, in the future, want to work on getting them to collide with each other.